Hey there, it's Steve from Serious Keto, and this is part 2 of my epic tortilla review. If you haven't watched part 1, I'll link to it right up here. Pause this video, go watch part 1, and then come back for this one. At the end of this video, I'm going to give my recommendations in terms of which couple of tortillas I think are the best. I'm also going to go in depth on some of the analysis. There is some interesting stuff that shows up in terms of glucose testing in these tortillas. So with that, let's get back into it. For the next 2 tortillas, we're going back to Aldi's with the Love and Fresh Low Carb. We've got both original and wheat, and I'm going to start with the original. For macros in a tortilla, we have 60 calories, 3 grams of fat, 19 grams of total carbohydrates, 15 grams of dietary fiber, for a net 4 grams. There's also 4 grams of protein. For ingredients, we have water, modified wheat starch, wheat gluten, unbleached wheat flour, oat fiber, palm oil, and then 2% or less of the following: baking powder, mono and diglycerides, salt, guar gum, dough conditioner, preservatives, and sucralose. So there's at least a couple of ingredients in here that are going to be troublesome for some people. The tortillas themselves, very much like a standard flour tortilla. Smell like a flour tortilla, makes sense. Contains flour. Let's see how it stands up taste-wise. That tastes pretty good. And I think some of the aftertaste that I've gotten on some of the others, I think the sucralose in this kind of masks that, because I get like a little bit of that weird, not quite exactly bitter, but then the sucralose sort of kicks in and covers that up. This tastes good enough that I suspect I'm going to see a glucose reaction. That's my prediction. So we are back with the glucose results on that Love and Fresh tortilla, and the results are the worst of the bunch so far, with 29 points of movement in glucose. Generally 30 is considered a spike. 29, 30, this is close enough. All right, next up we have the Love and Fresh Low Carb Whole Wheat. 60 calories, 2 grams of total fat, 18 grams total carbohydrates, 14 of which are fiber, for a net 4 grams. 4 grams of protein. In terms of ingredients, water, modified wheat starch, wheat gluten, whole wheat flour, oat fiber, palm oil, wheat bran, baking powder, mono and diglycerides, salt, preservatives, guar gum, dough conditioner, and sucralose. So I think that's pretty much the same ingredients as the last Love and Fresh one I did. Texture on this seems to be a little bit more dense than the original Love and Fresh. Edges a little more ragged, looks a little more rustic. It does have a slightly more whole wheat taste than the original. Same sort of sucralose sweetness at the end. I feel it tastes more like a wheat bread than it does like a flour tortilla. I think something like this would probably go good on some sort of a roll-up sandwich, turkey roll-up, Caesar roll-up, something like that. Unless, of course, it spikes my blood glucose the same way the one did yesterday, in which case, well, that would make it a no-go. And we'll know about that in a couple of hours. All right, it's been over 2 hours. Let's take a look at the levels software and see how the whole wheat tortillas performed. A 32-point rise in glucose. So that now is definitely into spike territory. It also validates what we saw yesterday in the original Love and Fresh tortillas, because that was right about 30. I think it was 29. So yeah, both of these two, I think we can probably cross off my list, at least, just due to the glucose response. Now we have the most requested tortilla. And I think the reason it's the most requested is it's the one that I see most commonly at grocery stores, and that is the Mission Carb Balance. Per tortilla, we're looking at 70 calories, 3 grams of total fat, 19 grams of total carbohydrates, 15 grams of dietary fiber for a net 4 grams, and 5 grams of protein. For ingredients, it seems like all of these are remarkably similar in terms of ingredients. We have water, modified wheat starch, enriched bleached flour, wheat gluten vegetable shortening, including soybean oils, wheat gluten isolate, salt, baking soda, cellulose gum, distilled monoglycerides, sucralose, fumaric acid, calcium propionate, and sorbic acid to maintain freshness. So I feel like many of these tortillas that I've tried so far have remarkably similar ingredients, and it's probably just a difference of ratios, really. Like a lot of the other flour tortillas, this smells like a flour tortilla. It's pliable like a flour tortilla. And pretty much tastes like a flour tortilla. I'm gonna have another bite just because I'm not sure if I'm picking up that, slightly weird, just slightly bitter, covered up with sucralose ending. These are pretty good, honestly. I think they would be passable for a real flour tortilla. And as a result, I'm kind of expecting to see another big glucose response. But we'll know for sure in a couple of hours. All right, let's take a look at the results for carb balance. I can't say that I'm shocked. A 38-point rise in glucose. I mean, it tasted too good to be true, so sorry to be the bearer of bad news on that one. For the final 2 tortillas, I'm going to be doing sort of a baseline. Things that either shouldn't affect my blood glucose at all or should really affect my blood glucose. The first of which is going to be the Egg Life tortillas, and I should see nothing in terms of a blood glucose response for this. We're looking at 0 grams of total fat, 0 grams of total carbohydrates, 5 grams of protein. The ingredients are egg whites, xanthan gum, natural flavor, salt, and nisin or nisin. It's a natural preservative. All right, these are some very pliable, very stretchy tortillas here. These are, I stretched too hard. Oh well, you get the picture. They hold together pretty well, unless you really rip on them. So the taste on this, fairly bland. Not bad bland, just it tastes like sort of a mildly salty egg white. If you don't like egg whites, you're not gonna like this at all, but if you don't have a problem with egg whites, well, it makes a suitable tortilla. I've also been told that there's a video where Nisha Berry uses these and slices them thin into noodles to use as pasta. I'm not sure if it's in soup or with a sauce, but I can see that pretty easily. In maybe a chicken noodle soup or perhaps like an Alfredo or something like that. Anyhow, I'm going to finish this and I'll be back in 2 hours with what I expect is going to be no glucose response. All right, let's see how the Egg Life wrapper performed. Not a big surprise. 0 points of glucose increase. In fact, it kind of trended down over the course of 2 hours. So that's what I expected for a baseline. In the next segment, I'm going to try the other extreme. I'm going to have a full-fledged, real flour tortilla and see what sort of glucose response I get out of that, and compare that to some of the higher glucose response keto or low-carb tortillas. So now the big question is, how is my glucose going to react to a real flour tortilla? So I have here some Super Burrito style flour tortillas from El Rey, which is a Milwaukee company. It would have been great if I would have been able to get some Mission or La Banderita or one of those that's one of the brands that I tried for low carb, but this is what I have. Now these are super burritos, these are really big, so I had to actually cut one in half to get to the same weight as the other ones that I had done, the low carb ones. In terms of carbs, we're looking at, once I cut them in half, about 21 to 22 grams of total carbs, 1 gram of fiber for about a net 20 to 21. The taste is not all that dissimilar from some of the other ones that I had, those low carb ones. The difference is there's no sort of aftertaste or after texture sort of thing in my mouth. It's a pretty clean sort of end. But I'm going to finish eating this and then I'll be back in 2 hours or so and we'll see what the blood glucose response is. All right, let's see what, okay. I was kind of talking while pulling this up and this is not at all what I expected. Just a 9-point rise in glucose from that regular El Rey tortilla. I'm not sure what to make of this, honestly. I'm a little bit speechless. I think what I'm going to do, because I know that I consumed over 20 grams of net carbs just in that half a tortilla today, plus then whatever else I wind up eating for dinner, etc. This morning I was at a 1.0 for ketones, so I'll see what I'm at tomorrow morning for ketones and then make a decision. If I'm out of ketosis, then that tells me that there's a problem. There's sort of the expected problem that I was going to have by eating this tortilla. If I'm not, I think maybe I need to go out and buy a package of Mission or La Banderita regular tortillas. So I'm comparing their low carb to their regular and see what kind of blood glucose results I get. Because this, I'm kind of speechless at this. Okay, this is going to be the final test for this video. The El Rey Burrito tortilla, while it didn't have a profound effect on my blood glucose, did impact my ketones. So here's where I was the morning before I had that tortilla. And I mean, it's not a spectacular GKI ketosis score, but I still had ketones of 1.0, so decent. And then here is the morning after. I'm still creating ketones, I'm at 0.4, but I am out of nutritional ketosis. Additionally, although I felt some inflammation from some of the keto or low carb tortillas that I tried, and I'll talk about that in the summary, it was nothing compared to what I felt after eating that full-on tortilla. Typically, when I get inflammation, I feel it mostly in my knees, and I get it about 2.5 to 4 hours after eating. And boy, did I get it from that El Rey tortilla. I felt 20 years older. It hurt. It was physically painful. It wasn't just stiffness. So that kind of has me a little reluctant to do this final test, but I'm going to do it anyway because I want to be consistent here. So I'm trying out a brand of tortillas, Mission, which is the same as one of the low carb ones that I did. I'll be doing these street tacos, and for this, 2 tortillas is a serving size. That gets me within about 7 to 9 grams of the same weight for all of those other tortillas. Carbohydrates, total carbs, we're looking at 26, 1 gram of dietary fiber for a net 25. So I'm burning up my full carb intake today just on these 2 tortillas. The ingredients, I'm not going to run through them all. It's surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, it looks remarkably similar to all of the low-carb tortillas. And perhaps when I do the summary, I'll go ingredient by ingredient just to see how much of a difference is there between these and the low-carb ones. I can tell you the texture on this already, I love. Oh, I haven't had a tortilla like this in 3 years or more, 3.5, maybe even longer. I'm really conflicted about doing this right now, but I know if I don't do it, people are going to ask, what's the difference between the low carb tortillas and a real tortilla? So I got to find out. Here we go. That's really good. It also makes me sad that I'm eating it because I know how this is going to affect me, or at least I think I know how it's going to affect me. But we'll be back in a little over 2 hours with the results, and we'll know for sure. Okay, I'm back with the results on the regular non-low carb Mission Street taco shells, tortillas. And here is the result. A 37-point glucose spike. So, not good, but honestly, I was expecting worse. But here's where things get interesting, and this is the reason why I did this test. Here is a comparison between the Mission Street Tacos, so the non-low carb version. That is the green curve on this graph. The Mission Carb Balance is the white. Not all that dissimilar. Now, if your reaction to this and seeing this is the same as mine, you're probably feeling, I'm not sure, anger, betrayal, that you've been deceived. And if that's what you're feeling, well, you're in good company, because that's how I feel right now looking at this. Anyhow, what I need to do is I need to go back and look at all the video that I've compiled so far. I'm going to put this into a spreadsheet, and I'm going to compare each of these tortillas, and then I'm going to try and unpack it for you all. So let's talk about all of that. First off, the El Rey tortilla. Why did that not spike my blood glucose? I have a couple of ideas on that. The first is that is the only situation where I had 2 tortillas in one day. I had the Egg Life tortilla, and then about 3 hours later, I had the El Rey tortilla. I figured since there was no reaction to the Egg Life tortilla that it should be safe to test both on the same day. But it's possible that that may have interfered with my results, since I wasn't, I guess, fully technically fasted when I tested the El Rey. The other possibility is ingredients. And I wanted to take a look at the ingredient list, but my wife ate the last of the tortillas and she threw the bag away, so I can't do that. And that is the big reason why I went out and I bought some more Mission tortillas. I felt it was important to test a non-low carb version of a brand that I had tested a low carb version of. So that's why I tested the street tacos from Mission versus the Mission Carb Balance. After getting the results that I got between the 2 Mission tortillas that wound up being statistically probably identical. I think there was a point difference between the 2 in terms of blood glucose reaction. Both of them were glucose spikes. I took a look at the ingredients, which I'll put right over here. They have remarkably similar ingredients. I'm looking at the list right here. The only thing that the street tacos have that Carb Balance doesn't have is sugar. And in the Carb Balance, you've got sucralose instead. Additionally, in the Carb Balance, you've got modified wheat starch, which I'm sure is something they're counting as a fiber, wheat gluten, which is a protein, wheat gluten isolate, I'm assuming also protein, and cellulose gum, which I'm going to assume is a fiber. But essentially, they're the same tortillas. It's just one they added some more fiber to, and some more gluten, probably to make it a little bit more stretchy and chewable. So I don't think it should come as a tremendous shock to any of us that similar ingredients are going to produce a similar glucose response. Now, one thing that did occur with the non-low carb tortillas, and this is maybe a little TMI, but some serious gas. And I have not really had much in the way of gas in the 3.5 years that I've been keto. But what I had after eating those street tacos was unbelievable. Probably within an hour of eating it, you could hear and I could feel what was going on down in my body. And it was some serious gas, like both in terms of bark and bite. But that aside, let's go back to some of my other little lessons learned here. First off, I think the whole argument of net carbs versus total carbs sort of comes into question here, at least on store products. If I'm making something myself, a recipe myself, I know what's really fiber and what isn't really fiber. But this has really ratcheted up my skepticism on some of the store labeling. I think going forward, looking at store products, pre-packaged, pre-manufactured, processed keto products, I think maybe we need to start taking a look at total carbs instead of net carbs. That's one possibility. I think another big takeaway that comes along with this, and I've talked about it before in some of my reviews, is you cannot trust keto labeling. If something says it's a keto product or keto friendly or low carb, to me, that means nothing. The onus still needs to be upon each of us to take a look at the ingredients and determine, does this really seem keto or not? And I think furthermore, the onus needs to be upon each of us to own our measurements, our personal measurements in terms of glucose response, whether that's using a continuous glucose monitor or just a blood glucose monitor like the Keto Mojo or whatever brand you prefer. But I think when we try out new products, especially supposedly keto products, we need to test probably 4 times. I would say test initially as a baseline, test at the 30-minute mark to see what kind of rise we're getting. Is it a very rapid spike? Test at an hour. That's usually when I see my highest point in terms of glucose, is at the 1 hour mark, and then test again at 2 hours to see how well we recover. And now the summary. What are the best tortillas out of this entire lot? I think if you're looking at clean keto, if you're looking at something that is not going to have any impact on your glucose, or shouldn't have any impact on your glucose, it's the Egg Life wrappers. Yes, they're bland. Yes, they're kind of expensive, but then again, I think all of these are expensive. Yeah, Egg Life. Egg Life is the way to go. If you do not have an issue with gluten or wheat, I think La Banderita is the way to go. That and the Olay Extreme Wellness both had a glucose response that was mild. It was 12 to 15 points. Let's see, in terms of net carbs, both have 4 net carbs, and both of them did not have soybean oil. That's another consistent thing I saw in all of these that I tried. I only had an inflammation reaction in those that had soybean oil. So for me, at least, wheat, gluten, I don't have an inflammation response. Soybean oil, though, gets me every time. Between the La Banderita and the Olay Extreme Wellness, the Olay brand had that slightly gritty texture or powdery texture. To me, La Banderita, they were good. They were almost as good as a regular flour tortilla without nearly the sort of glucose response. So there's your dirty keto option, Egg Life Clean. I hope you found this video or these videos useful and or thought-provoking. I don't foresee myself doing an epic review, a big review of a dozen different products again like this for probably some time, if ever. I'm really just not that interested in putting myself through inflammation like this again, at least for a while. But if it was helpful to you, it was worth it to me. And if it was helpful to you, please click that like button, tap that subscribe button, hit the bell to turn on all notifications. And thanks for watching.